We Need Each Other is a podcast about the importance of human interaction. It provides a reminder that we are not intended to live in isolation. Human beings need each other. The things about another that piss you off and the things that take you over the moon are all opportunities to see through another's eyes, recognize their intrinsic value, and then look more deeply within ourselves to find the love that's always there. Welcome to yet another episode of We Need Each Other. We're still going, y'all. It's been 50 some odd episodes. I didn't know when I started the first one if I was actually going to do a second one. But here we go, because there are so many interesting people in the world to talk to, so many exciting things that are happening, exciting in one way or another, that's happening in the world. And my guest today, I am excited about because I stumbled upon her through a post that I read on LinkedIn. So I'm going to start with reading this post. It said, "So this is 45. I am blessed in so many ways to see another birthday. I was born at 8:33 a.m. on August 12, 1976 in Brooklyn, New York, and grew up in Bedford-Stuy, pre-gentrification. Both of my parents were crack cocaine addicts. My mom died at 49 from HIV and complications from years of drug abuse, and battled my own health issues to where I wasn't sure if I would see 30, much less 45. I'm still here. I survived. I thrived. Enjoy every day. Don't spend one more minute in a situation that is making you miserable. It's not the years in your life, it's the life in your years." So I read that from Joy Assent. Assent? Yes. And is it Assent? I just want to make sure I pronounce it. Assent. Mm-hmm. I knew that was wrong. I read that from Joy Assent, and I immediately reached out and said, "I'd love to have you on the podcast because I want to know, how do you thrive? What is your superhero?" I'm always asking people, what's your superhero? And so she sent me her bio, and I went, what? She said, "Joy Assent is an Army veteran, former civil servant, and HR professional. She is an enthusiastic leader who feels most engaged and fulfilled when she's supporting, encouraging, pouring into, and removing barriers for others so they can accomplish great things and do their best work." I so love that because I'm sure, Joy, that you have much to teach people about how to pull through difficult situations. So I guess my first thing I want to know is, how'd you end up in the Army?
So, as you mentioned,
welcome to the episode.
Thank you.
Of all. Welcome. Yeah.
Thank you.
I'm just so curious about your life.
Yeah. Thank you for having me. So
absolutely.
From my post, I mentioned that I was born in Brooklyn, New York, and when I was around 10, going into 5th grade, we moved to rural North Carolina. So a lot of things transpired going up in New York. We were at one time robbed at gunpoint in our apartment. Somebody followed my sister in after she was coming home from school and kind of barged his way in and held us at gunpoint, tied us up. There was another situation where I was standing outside of our building, and on the 4th floor, I guess there were some people getting high, and they broke out the 4th floor window. So all the glass came down on me and a friend who were standing there and cut me across my head, had to get stitches. It was just like...
How old were you then? You said 5th grade?
Probably 10 by that time. I remember it vividly as far as what I had on. I had on like a purple short set. I had some white socks and those jelly shoes that we used to wear back then. It was all covered in blood. And I just remember running upstairs to get one of my parents to let them know what happened. So just a lot of, there's good memories, and then there's things that I think about and I'm just like, wow, I survived those things. I made it out of those things. So again, to escape what was going on in New York, my parents, who again were active drug addicts, I guess they moved back to rural North Carolina where each of them were from, maybe expecting a change in their lives, but they still had the addictions. So that continued in North Carolina. They were still functioning addicts, but there were periods where we wouldn't have electricity, or we wouldn't have a stable place to stay. We would be living in other people's homes that maybe I didn't even know. So just a lot of instability. My father would work. He would keep a job, and sometimes he would come home and say, "Okay, hold this money for me. This is for the rent. This is for the bills. This is for." But 3 o'clock in the morning, he's coming in. Where's that money I gave you? And then you're like, "Well, there goes whatever
And
we
you
thought
had
we
to
were going
give
to
it
have."
up.
So,
You had to give
right.
it up. Yeah.
Right. So a lot of instability, a lot of arguing and fighting, sometimes physical, between my parents. My dad was like 6'3", my mom was like 5 feet. So as a child, just hearing the arguing and the fighting and being helpless to protect your mom, and just a lot of those memories. So as soon as I was older,
You were an only child?
I
Only child?
no, I'm the youngest of three. I'm the youngest of three. So my sister is 4 years older than I am, and my brother is 6 years older than I am. And my brother, it's also key to note that my brother has a chromosomal abnormality. It's kind of like Down syndrome, but not quite. So he can't vocalize, and so he couldn't take care of himself. So that was another factor into that whole situation. So my sister, the middle child, was kind of looking out for each of us, as young as she was.
Yeah.
So as soon as I graduated high school, I graduated like June of '94, July, I was in basic training. So I even did like the early enlistment, to where my dad had to sign me in because I wasn't 18 yet. So that as soon as I graduated, I joined the Army just to get away. I mean, I didn't see myself being able to afford to go to college like everyone else, and I knew staying in that rural town, there was limited opportunities. There's like, you work at the textile factory. No offense to people who do that, but something in the back of my mind, as early as I can remember, always said, "This is not for me. This is not for me." So at the time, the Army was kind of my escape.
Wow. And so you were in the Army for how long?
I was in the Army a little over 6 years. First time I was away from home by myself. First time I was overseas. And I actually got out, I think, right around the time that I met my husband, fell in love, and was like, okay, I want to know where I'm going to be. And I didn't want to be a recruiter. I think they wanted me to go to school to be a recruiter, and I wasn't too keen on the uncertainty of that. So I got out in 2000 and was fortunate enough to be able to transition to the same job, but as a civilian, in the same organization. So that started my civil service career once I got out.
So I'm curious, you went into the Army really as an escape from life, this is an answer for me. What was your experience
Yes.
like in 6 years in the Army? What was the experience?
I think I was fortunate with my experience in the Army. Being a child, growing up in that kind of environment, you learn to be independent and just be disciplined. You don't want to be the one causing trouble. So, I mean, you could go either way. There's kids who grow up that way, who kind of go down that same path as their parents do. And then there are those who are like, I want no parts of that, and I'm going to try to stay out of trouble to avoid that. And so they go the other way. And so I went the opposite way in, I think I fit right in with the Army. I'm a rules person. I like to follow the rules and know what's expected of me. So it was a pretty easy transition for me. I think I was fortunate in the assignments that I got. I never had to be deployed to like a war zone. I was stationed in like Georgia and got to go to Japan and Thailand and Korea, and finally back here in the Virginia area. So my experience in the Army was good. I think it made me even stronger than I was. It helped me grow up very quickly because, again, I was still a teenager when I went in. I had to figure stuff out on my own, how to pay bills, just how to be even more independent and self-sufficient. And it was fortunate for me too that me being in the Army, I was able to help out my family in some ways who are back home, who needed help at the time. So it worked out.
So, I always say, well, because I do like wellness counseling with people, intuitive counseling, kind of a mental health kind of thing with people. And I always say that as devastating as one's beginnings may be, if using the opportunity of those beginnings, they're like the perfect thing to create in you who it is that you're meant to be. And we haven't even gotten that far in your story yet. And I can see how you took your beginnings and allowed them to help to shape what you wanted in your life rather than let them take over. That's right there. I just want to say how beautiful that was at that particular point. So did you meet your husband in the Army?
I did. After I came back from Japan around 98, I was stationed here in Virginia, and I don't think anything happens by accident. He was one of the people, the organization that I worked in, we had to have a certain access. And because I was new, somebody had to come and get me to escort me into the building. And he was that person. And of course, initially it wasn't love at first sight, but something about him was different from the other guys who were actively trying to get my attention. And he was just different. He carried himself differently. He carried himself respectfully. And I just felt comfortable around him. And so as we continued to work together, we kind of established that relationship. And we've been together ever since for 21 years this year.
How many?
21.
21 years. Wow.
Yes.
Your story, I mean, like we're just a few minutes into it and your story is just like making me very joyful and tearful at the same time. Because it's like guided. Your life is guided. And you allow the guidance.
Yes. And it's only now that I'm starting to see it, like in hindsight.
Yes.
Like that whole time. It's crazy, but I know now that it was ordained.
Yes. And we normally don't see it except in hindsight. That's how we see it when we look back.
Right.
So you refer to yourself as an extroverted introvert, which kind of sounds like, oh, that sounds like me. But what do you mean when you say that?
So if people were to meet me, especially with my husband, so we gel together because we are opposites, but we complement each other in good ways. So people would consider him to be the extrovert, and I am the more reserved, introverted person. However, if there's somebody who's going to go up and introduce themselves to somebody in a situation, it's going to be me. Mm-hmm. I'm going to introduce myself. I'm going to remember their names and remember the details about the people. I'm the person in the grocery store who's going to be like, that's a beautiful necklace you have on.
That's
Your
me.
skin is
Yes,
beautiful.
I know.
I love
right?
that outfit.
Yeah. But yet I'm really very introverted. I know.
Right. So I'm that person. So when people say introvert, they think shy or timid. I don't consider myself shy. I just know that I get drained eventually with all the interaction with people. So I don't get my energy from being around people. But when I need to be on, or if I'm in the mood, you would think I'm an extrovert. It just depends on the situation, how I feel. So that's what I mean when I say an extroverted introvert. I don't consider myself to be what people would typically consider an introvert. And I think the more comfortable I am, the more you will see of me, because I'm a very private person. But I find that balance because I feel like I feel like something in me connects with other people. And again, that's another one of those things that I'm still discovering. Like people have said, you have a presence, or you have a certain way in a room that I'm not even mindful of, but they'll tell me after the fact. So again, it's something I'm still trying to be mindful of and tap into, but yeah, I feel like I can go either way. But again, at the end of the day, working in HR all day, once I get home, my husband knows I'm going into
Yeah,
the cocoon to recharge and I'll be
yeah,
back
yeah.
in a few minutes.
Well, and I think many years ago, someone asked me because I was being very quiet. I was in a group of people and I was just being very quiet, and they've seen me other ways, and they're like, why are you so quiet? I said, because I like it in here. Like there's a peaceful, like
Right.
calm, something inside, and
Right.
I just like touching it sometimes. And that's how you do recharge. Yeah, that's how we recharge, is that we have to go inside to connect so that we can be that thing outside. It's beautiful that you
And we can
understand that.
still be having a good time. Right.
Yes.
We're still having a good
Yes,
time
exactly.
with all the
Right.
excitement and still being quiet, but it's hard for other people to understand that.
To understand. Yeah, I get you, fellow Leo.
Yes.
Yes, you just had a birthday. I just had a birthday. I love it.
Yes.
So you mentioned HR. So how'd you get in HR?
So, after
What an interesting life you've had.
I
Oh, Joy.
I finished my time in the Army, and then I was fortunate enough to be able to transition from the role in the military to do the same job as a civilian in the government. And so I was working in national security policy for total close to 20 years, writing policy for Department of Defense, Department of the Army, and I had moved up fairly quickly within the government compared to people in my age group, my ethnicity. So I had made it to GS 15, which is the highest numerical level for a government civilian, and had become a leader of leaders. And I felt like the further I got away from the parts of the work that I like to do, the less I enjoyed it. And it became more stressful. And so while I was trying to tap into and still lean into the parts of the work that I liked, which is the people, helping people, the people interaction, it still wasn't meeting my need, and I still kept feeling like there's something different I should be doing. I should be doing something different. But then your mind is like, okay, you have this good government job. You know how many people will never make it to GS 15, much less a black woman. And the role that I left when I left the government, I was the first black woman to be in that role. And especially at the time, I was under 40. So that was no small feat. Again, another thing that I realized in hindsight. Then I was just
Yes.
like, it's another
Yeah.
job. I made it. I'm just doing what I'm supposed to do. But again, even all that considered, I was at the point where I wasn't feeling fulfilled. I was working in the Pentagon, and it started to get to the point where Sunday nights I was dreading going back into the office. And I just decided that I can't keep doing this. But you're battling the fear of the unknown, because I didn't know what I wanted to do. It would be different if I was like, well, I want to be an author, I want to leave and go write a book, or I want to start a business. I was like, I don't know. And people were like, what's your passion? I don't know. I don't know what I want to do. I just know it's not this. And so ultimately I had the talk with my husband, and instead ask him, if he would be okay with me taking some time away. Initially I thought it was going to be like a year. And he was okay with it. And so I just left December 26th, 2016.
Oh, wow.
I left the government, no job lined up. My coworkers thought I was crazy, but at the same time envious, like I wish I was brave enough to do it. But I got to the point where I was like, I can't stay here paralyzed by fear of the unknown, or stay in this comfort zone that's really not comfortable, just because I'm afraid of what's out there. So I left with no job and was at home for a few months, volunteering at the hospital and reorganizing closets, driving myself crazy. And I ran into a friend who was working in HR for a hospitality company at hotels, and she needed an assistant. And she asked if I wanted to come try it out, and so I did that for a few months. But very quickly, I'm still in leader mode, so I could see that,
Yeah.
okay,
Yeah.
I'm not comfortable staying in assistant mode,
Yeah.
because we might bump
Right.
heads. So a few months in, I gave her like 60 days notice. She was planning for her wedding, so I said, I'm going to stay and help you get through your wedding and your honeymoon. but then I think I'm going to move on to something else. Well, corporate found out that I had put in my notice, and they said, well, hey, would you consider trying your hand at this manager role where you would oversee 5 hotels in this other region? I was like, well, I'm still learning HR, but if you're willing to take a chance on me, sure, I'll try it. So I went from assistant to the manager over 5 hotels within maybe 3 or 4 months. And so I went and did that. And then a few months later, the VP of HR comes to me and says, hey, I need a number 2. And I said, well, didn't I tell you guys I'm still learning HR? And you have all these other people who have been in HR for 10 years and 12 years. Why me? And she was like, because I want you. So I said, okay, well, if you're willing to take the chance, I'll do it. And then she says, oh, by the way, I'm pregnant and I will be going out on maternity leave within a few months. So as you're still learning HR, you will have to cover for me because I'm having a baby. So I did that, was her number 2, and guess I did a pretty good job. So much so that she got comfortable and had another baby back to back. So I covered for her for another maternity leave. So that was my first HR role, working in hotels with a lot of hourly employees, dealing with a myriad of employee relations issues. But it also, again, helped me see which parts of HR I was starting to feel more comfortable with and which areas I wanted to learn more about. So that's how I got into HR.
So what I hear from you is, in the Army, as a Black person and a woman, you felt treated well. You were treated well.
I was. It was a little different because in the Army, we're in uniform. They're right, going off of, your rank. So my experience was that I can't think of any issue where my ethnicity or my gender was an issue. Were there situations where, in hindsight again, people may have been inappropriate? Yes, there were a couple of those, male leaders who did not act the way they should have. But it's one of those situations where, again, you step back and look at it and we're like, okay, that wasn't okay. But nothing to the extreme. In the civilian world, when I became a civilian, took the uniform off, the field I was in was predominantly older white male. So again, going into these spaces, sitting at these tables where I am the only Black person, the only woman and younger, and on top of that, looking even younger than I actually was a challenge, because I think a lot of that experience helped me to build confidence and be more assertive and not think that assertive means aggressive. It's voicing what you need. It's voicing your expectations and setting boundaries for people. So I had to do that because I was in policy, and a lot of these situations requires you to negotiate, to go in representing Department of Defense and what our position is. So I think that experience was helpful, again, being one of the few in the room, or sometimes the only in the room, and having to stand my ground. So I do think that part of my life experience has helped me both at work and outside of work, just to be more confident in myself and who I am. And I had a mentor who was an African American, a Black man, in one of my organizations, remind me, like, when you go into these meetings, you take a seat at the table, and you should always have something to say. Don't assume that you need to sit on the side because you assume these people are higher grade or higher rank than you. If you're representing us, go in there, take your seat at the table, know what you're going to say, and do that with confidence. And I took that with me in that situation and situations going forward. So I'm one of those people that I may not say a whole lot, but when I choose my words carefully, and when I speak, I'm intentional about what I'm going to say.
So your life is beautiful, really, in so many ways, Joy. How did you remain connected with your family through all of this?
I did.
From the time you
I
left went to
do
the army and all these.
absolutely. I do want to say so. We all moved as a family to North Carolina. Once we got to North Carolina, my parents stayed together for a bit, and then they ultimately separated. My mom kind of got further out there. My dad was still using, but he was still functioning. So yes, stay connected. My brother ultimately went to kind of an assisted living kind of facility for people with situations like his, because my parents weren't able to take care of him. Sister is too young, so he's there. He's still there and doing well. My sister is still in North Carolina. She's doing well. So yes, we stay connected. My mom, again, when I was away, didn't have a whole lot of interaction with her. But I do want to say, again, another blessing in the situation, despite how crazy and unstable and dysfunctional the situation was, our parents never abused us. They may have been a little neglectful at times, but there was no intentional physical or emotional abuse, if that's even possible in that scenario. We were never molested, or I just think of the situations with like strange people in the house and your parents not always around, and we were fortunate that none of us were harmed in that way. And I know throughout that I was never angry at my parents. I was always kind of sad for them and just disappointed that I couldn't just have normal parents like everybody else. But I knew in my heart that how they were was a result of how they were brought up and the demons that they were battling from their upbringing. My dad was a Vietnam vet, so dealing with PTSD and dealing with his upbringing of being the only boy and 7 children and his dad never telling him he loved him and just so many things. So I could never like be angry at them. My heart just hurt for them because I knew they were each battling with their own issues that I couldn't save them from, and they were unfortunately doing the best that they knew how, based
That's
off
it
of
right there.
how they came up.
If it's a thing I say to clients all the time. Everybody, no matter what their behavior looks like, is doing the best that they can at the time. You may think they could do better, but they're doing the best that they are able to do in that moment, no matter how horrific it may look to someone else. And so what a beautiful thing, though, Joy, that you had that kind of recognition within you from childhood. And it's that recognition and that from my perspective, it's my perspective, but that it's that recognition and that connection that you always had an awareness of that has carried you through to this point, to have a husband who just happened to show up to escort you, and now you've been married for 21 years. And do you have children?
No children.
No children. Okay.
So I've never been one who was like, I don't want to have kids. I was going either way. It was like, if I have them, I have them. If I don't, I don't. And for us, it just worked out. Well, at one point, when we initially got married, we were like checking in. You want kids? Nope, I'm good. You good? We're good. Yeah. So we weren't pressing it. We got to a point where I think a lot of our friends were getting pregnant. So then we were like, well, do you want to try? And of course, around that time, I found out that I had liver disease. And I found out because I had started the birth control patch and I got jaundice. And the doctor was like, okay, this is weird. Why would you have acute jaundice from the birth control patch? And so they did tests, found out I had a liver issue and my liver was scarred. And it was like scarred at stage 3 of 4 to where it could start turning into cirrhosis. So to make a very long story short on that end, for years I was taking medication, doing clinical trials, trying to get better. And then ultimately in 2017, my liver kind of recovered. There's a test that they do to check the level of scarring. And in 2017, before I was at stage 3 or 4, and in 2017, there was zero sign of scarring. So again, another situation where God showed himself. But I say all that to say that because I was dealing with that issue, I didn't want to risk trying to have children when I wasn't like really pushing for that. It was just, I was going to try just to try. So no children, but we have nieces and nephews and godchildren that we love on, and we don't feel like we're lacking in that area, again, because neither one of us was really hard pressed to have children.
So you say that you love supporting, encouraging, and pouring into, removing barriers for people. You certainly are the perfect person to be able to help people through that. Do people appreciate the value of what you're bringing to them? I bet they do.
I say sometimes they do, and sometimes I'm not sure. Again, as I've gotten older, I am starting to appreciate more about myself. And again, I'm that person that people call not necessarily always to check on me, but to offload. Well, let me tell you what happened today. I may not get a word in edgewise in the conversation.
That's me.
Except
That's
for
my life.
hello.
Yeah.
And they're like, okay, I got to go. And so the part of me that wants to be there and support people is like, okay, well, at least they got that burden off their chest. I mean, they dumped it on me, but I was able to help them through that. But I think I am blessed with an ability to empathize with people. And I feel like people can sense that I'm being genuine. And I can see how that plays out in good ways and maybe not so great ways, because I feel like people who feel like I might expose them tend to shy away from me. And that may be a good thing if they ultimately...
When you say expose them, what do you mean? What do you mean when you say expose?
When people aren't being their authentic selves, and because I am an introvert, because I may not say a whole lot, especially as I'm getting to know you, some people aren't comfortable with that. And for that reason, people may tend to shy away from me. Or again, if they aren't being fully genuine, something about me makes them uncomfortable. And I'm starting to I've sensed that. But I do feel like my introversion helps me to be a good listener. I pay attention to people. I try to get to know them on a deeper level. And I think in general, I just enjoy helping other people, whether that's by doing something practical to help them, something tangible, or by giving advice or lending an ear to friends, coworkers, people I meet on the street. Like I said earlier, I like to make people feel good. I like to make people smile. And again, I'm that person that will come up to you in the grocery store and tell you how great you look and mean it.
Yes.
And so I think in a lot of ways, I'm still discovering who God created me to be. I feel like I agonized for so many years about what is my purpose. And, you know, you look on social media and you see all these people doing these great things and starting businesses and they're public speaking. And it's like, okay, God, what am I supposed to be doing? And in my journey over these recent years, he is saying, okay, start with being you. Be a light so that others can see him in me. And remember that I am here to fill a joy-sized hole in the world that only I can fill. So nobody else can be me. And I shouldn't be trying to be anybody else. And I'm seeing the more that I tap into that the more I am being a blessing to others. I had an example of that just today at work, where there was a situation in a meeting where some folks, I'm still new in this particular HR role, and some folks who are very passionate about their points of view were kind of talking over me as I was trying to make my point and put out some information. And you know, in the moment, you don't have the right words to say, and then you think later, well, I should have said that. But we had the next meeting this week, and I started out by kind of setting my boundaries and ground rules and just saying, you know, here's my expectation. I know you guys are getting to know me, but if we're going to have a conversation, let me speak first. And then if you have questions or if you want to have a dialogue, we can do that. But you can't talk over me while I'm trying to disseminate information. I understand you're passionate about it. So long story short, during this meeting that is virtual, one of the women who is seasoned and probably well established in her role emailed me and said, thank you. She said, your courage in sharing your boundaries at today's staff meeting was very empowering. I have not had the courage to be as forthright in similar situations and will take a page from your notebook going forward. So it's little things like that for me that keep me going, because it's a reminder that somebody's always watching you. And so even in the small ways, by being me, it helped her to say, well, I can do that too. I can speak up for myself too. So I'm trying to be more mindful of those situations.
So we live in a society where mental health is a huge issue. It's even more now than ever. It is a huge issue for our Black people. You never had to go through any kind of counseling, therapy, or anything for yourself, correct?
I did not, but I absolutely should have. And now I have reached out to a therapist that I start working with. Actually, tomorrow is our first official session. Because, again, I feel like we should have an outlet. And you talked about mental health. One thing that I didn't want to do with that post, and of course I thought about it afterwards, is like oversimplify my situation. Say, well, if I did it, you can do it too, and everything is going to be roses and daisies. I think that people should know that it's absolutely okay to feel discouraged or upset or fearful. It's okay to feel your feelings, because life is hard. And I don't want to make my story seem like, well, all you got to do is pull yourself up by your bootstraps and stop complaining and whining and everything will be great. No, there's real life obstacles. There's real life barriers for people. There's real life mental health issues that people need to get taken care of. So I would say it's okay to feel how you feel and acknowledge how you feel. But if at all possible, don't stay in that place. Leverage your encouraging friends and family if you have them. If you need to seek out a mental health professional, that's absolutely okay, because, in our community, in the Black community, there's still, unfortunately, that stigma that we don't need to get help and that we're crazy if we go see a therapist. It's okay. If you believe in God, talk to Him and be real about your feelings. And another thing that helps me is to focus outward, because, again, I know mental health is serious. Some situations require therapy and maybe even medication to help regulate, depending on how serious the situation is. But I also know when we focus our energy on what we have to be grateful for, and we focus on helping others, we have less time to wallow and get depressed and be discouraged. And I know for myself, I'm a living witness that there's hope. Again, not trying to oversimplify anything, but there's nothing so hopeless that it can't be turned around eventually. It may not be immediate, but don't give up hope and seek help if you feel like you need it.
So you say that perhaps you should have. Was that something that you weren't aware of in the time? And as you look back, you're believing, well, I could have sought help at this particular point? Or why do you say, perhaps I should have?
I say that because, again, now in hindsight, when I think about what I went through, in my mind, on one hand, it's just, well, that's just what we had to deal with. But that was trauma. That was, there were so many traumatic experiences interwoven in my experience that I see how they affect me today. But again, you just live through it. And that's not necessarily okay. Black women, they want us to be strong and resilient and tough and go through everything. And yes, we are strong and powerful, but we also need to leverage help and be able to talk to somebody about the things that we have experienced and be mindful of how that's impacting how we are living as adults. I can see how some things play out in my marriage where, because I was so used to being independent and used to expecting people to not show up for me, that there's things that I don't let my husband do because I'm like, I got it. And so I have to remind myself to let him do things for me as my husband. So it shows up in different ways. Relationships with friends where I'm still somewhat guarded because growing up, you couldn't have close friends. They can't come over to your house and see what your house looked like, or if something crazy is going on at your house. So you kind of put those walls up, and then you don't realize it until an adult how your upbringing impacted you. And I might think I'm being open and candid, but some of my friends are like, yeah, you still have a wall up. There's still things about you that I don't know. And it's not necessarily intentional for me. It's just what I've known because I'm used to operating independently. I don't want everybody to know what's going on. And so you kind of keep people at arm's length.
Mm-hmm. The story, your story is beautiful. To me, it's like, it's exactly the way life is supposed to be. You had devastating hardship that you came up in. There are people who have worse stories, there are people who have better. It's always going to be true. But what you came through was not difficult, and you could have gone a completely different way from the way that you did, but it felt like you always had something that you connected to inside of you. And even now, even though you've moved through life in a really beneficial way, there's a recognition that there's more for me to do to be healthier mentally, emotionally, and that you're taking those steps. That is what we're supposed to do. This is just, it's a beautiful testimony. So I ask people all the time, what is your superpower? What's your superpower? Because you've leaned into something. Well, how would you describe it?
I think now, again, I would say definitely my faith in God. When I was younger, my grandmother used to talk about God and pray and make us go to church. So I didn't have a full appreciation back then. But as I got older and had my own relationship with God and went through my own experiences where I know only God brought me through that, I would definitely say that my faith is key. And I think that's key. I think, again, having good people to support you. My husband is great. Again, I'm the introvert. He's the extrovert. He's a clown. So it's good to have somebody to keep you laughing and keep you focused on the positive, because sometimes I can go straight to doomsday and he's like, well, no, think about this. Consider this. It's not as terrible as you think. So leveraging or having a support system who can keep you positive. And then I think just staying grateful, even in the situations where you feel like it's not ideal, there's always something to be grateful about. And again, I'm not saying don't acknowledge how you feel or ignore your feelings or have this toxic positivity, but there is something that you can focus on to be grateful for in your situation. So I think that combination of things is what has kept me strong, and just me continuing to be on this journey of trying to be the best me and figure out why I'm here on this planet. Why did I survive all of this? There's a reason for it. It didn't just happen just to happen.
That's right.
There's a reason for it, and I have to share that story. So that was another piece of me just being reluctant about even sharing my story. And my husband would tell me all the time, you have a story to tell, you have a story to tell. And I'm like, well, everybody's gone through stuff. But again, you have gone through your situation for a reason, and only you can tell your story And other people need to hear that to encourage them and to help them get through whatever they're going through. So it's can be kind of selfish in a way to keep that hidden, keep it to yourself.
So you're writing a book?
I am not writing a book.
You're like, no.
I'm trying to survive podcast life. This is my first podcast. Thank you again for having me. Because I'm thinking, okay, I'm not selling anything. I'm not an entrepreneur. I'm just a regular HR lady trying to live my life. So,
but what you're selling,
for now.
And it's not even that you're not selling. What you are exemplifying is the way that we are intended to live life. I say to my clients all the time that there is a divine activity that's always happening, and we don't always understand the things that it has happening, like what's happening in the world right now. It's hard to understand. I see it as there's a thousands of years of devastation and a way of living that is dying out, and there's something new that's being born. And so I see that you, Joy, were born at this time to be the light, and that we are here to be examples, and that is exactly what you are. I don't know all the details and the minor details of your life, but I can see from the broad stroke, the broad picture of what you've just explained to us here is that you are a shining example of the way that we are to live life, and to live life more fully, to be a beneficial presence in the world. Joy Assent, you are a beneficial presence in the world. That is the absolute truth. Just breathe that in. And, whether you write a book or somebody discovers you and wants to do a movie about you or whatever it is, if I was that person, I'd want to do a movie about your life, because what you've just explained, I would say a majority of people that walked what you walked through in childhood would go a different road. They would go a different path. What you've done is not what the majority of people do. So, keep doing what you're doing. Truly, just keep going inside and speaking from there. Keep going inside, hearing from there. Keep doing what you're doing. And God bless you that you have such a wonderful husband and partner in life. I'm so happy for you. I'm so happy that I've met you, honestly.
Thank you.
And more people need to meet you. More people need to know you. More people need to hear your story, because your story is beautiful. And it's ongoing. It's not over. It's continuing. I can't wait to see what happens next.
See what you've started. See what you have started.
Yes, look what I started. Yay! So, your final message to the world, because the world's listening, your final message would be what? Let's think about this. In these tumultuous times that we are living in right now, because we are living in crazy right now, what would be your message?
My message would be that you have a story, you have a purpose, and that no matter what you're going through, even though it may not seem like God is with you, He hasn't left you. He is ordering your steps. He's guiding you. He is not the cause of all the crazy in this world. And that there is hope. And that you were created to fill a space in this world that only you can fill. And you can only do that by being you, not try to copy somebody else or compare yourself to somebody else. You can only do it by being truly and authentically you. And I feel like every day I'm still trying to get closer and closer to doing that for myself.
Well, I think you're doing an awesome job, and I'm very, very happy to have met you and to have had this opportunity to speak with you, because the name of the program is We Need Each Other. Well, you're certainly an example of that. We need what you are bringing to the world. Your voice, even when you're internal and you're not being extroverted, that voice, your being, who you are is needed. That person that you walked up to in the grocery store needed you to walk up to them in the grocery store and tap them and give them some joy. You have the perfect name, Joy. Yeah, so we need you. We need each other. We need you in this world that we're living in, Joy. I thank you so much for being here. And I'm so grateful that I've had an opportunity to get to know you. Yes. Are you ever in Los Angeles?
Thank you so much for having me.
Yes. Are you ever in Los Angeles?
I may be. So I'm still new in my job, but I do have a set of people that I support that is in Los Angeles. Mm-hmm. So at some point, I need to go visit them.
If you ever come out, please contact me. I would love to have lunch with you.
I will.
Or something.
I absolutely will. Yes.
Okay.
But thank you again so much for this podcast. Thank you.
Absolutely. My absolute pleasure. Take care.
All right.